Very welcome to the SoftCo webinar series, where today we're going to be looking at ERP changes and what that means for your organization. By way of introduction, my name is Adam McDonagh. I'm one of the AP specialists here in SoftCo, having been with the organization for over 10 years. And I'm also delighted to be joined by my esteemed colleague, Garret Pearse. Garret is one of our P2P automation experts and brings over 20 years experience within the industry, helping organizations like Patagonia, Logitech, and Volkswagen to automate their AP and P2P processes. Garret, you're very welcome. Thank you very much for jumping on here.
Well, my pleasure, Adam. Always happy to participate in these things. So hopefully provide some information for the attendees today.
Great, we really appreciate it and looking forward to today's conversation. We will kill our cameras, folks. You don't want to be staring at our faces throughout the duration of today's session. Just a small bit of housekeeping before we do jump right in. There is a very large audience joining us, which is fantastic. Given that you all are placed in listen-only mode, but we do want this to be as interactive as possible for you. So within the GoToWebinar control panel, there's an area there to submit questions and feedback to us. So if you have any burning questions along the way, be sure to submit those in and we'll answer them either throughout the course of today's webinar, or we'll also hold some time at the end to get to those questions as well. So please get them into us. Just to kick things off and suppose to set the scene, before we get into the main content, this webinar really is aimed at organizations who are already using some form of AP automation and are either right now going through an ERP transition upgrade or perhaps maybe looking at that over the next couple of years. So some of those organizations may be using SoftCo AP today, others may be using different AP solutions, but the key thing from Garret and my perspective is we want to give you the information and insights that you ultimately need to make that transition as smooth as possible for you and your organization. And the goal really is to ensure there's no disruption to your AP system itself or the overall invoice processing during that ERP change. So what we're going to do, and as you can see on the agenda slide here, is we're going to first and foremost look at the potential risks to the AP system and function during those ERP transitions and changes. We'll then jump into the 3 phases of AP readiness. So what you should be doing before any transition or change, what you need to be doing during the overall ERP project itself, and even once you're up and running with that new ERP system, what you need to do post go live or after that migration. We'll then cover off where SoftCo comes into play and how we can support those overall ERP transitions and changes. And as I've mentioned, as kind of a summary, we will leave you with some final tips, but we'll also be getting to some of those questions as well. So be sure to submit them through to us. Just to kick things off first, there is a poll that we would love to launch, and we'd ultimately love to understand where you are in your overall ERP migration journey. So I'll just quickly launch the poll here. Garret, has that launched successfully? Can you see that okay?
Yep, I can see that there. That's good.
Great. So we'll just give it a couple of seconds, folks, allow you to submit those answers through to us. So looking to see where you are in your ERP journey. Are you just starting planning right now with your ERP provider or system integrator? Are you currently in a migration project? Have you completed one over the last 12 months? Or are you not planning a migration in the near future? So we're just over the 30-second mark. I think everyone has submitted responses through to us. So I'll just give it another second or so. Okay, I will just close the poll now. Okay, so we have a mixed response coming back. Some people are just starting planning, others are in the middle of a project. So hopefully the webinar today will give you a better sense of the tips and tricks you need to be aware of as you're navigating those conversations and ultimately progressing through your projects. Garret, I've just relaunched the screen. Would you mind just confirming that the presentation?
See that there.
Great, super. So I think what we'd love to do first and foremost is maybe, Garret, if based on your experience of working with organizations of all shapes and sizes globally, a lot of those have undergone ERP transitions and migrations, particularly over the last couple of years as the providers are now coming forward and asking people to adopt and move to the cloud and upgrade it to their kind of SaaS versions, if you like. So based on what you've seen and the organizations that you've worked with, can you maybe shed some light on on the overall risks to the AP function and process during those migrations and upgrades?
Yeah, I think there's a number of different aspects to it. Is first of all, sometimes AP can be one of the last to know. The IT or other aspects, areas of finance have just gone ahead and are making those changes without much consideration for the impact on what AP are doing, particularly if you're using something like an AP automation solution that's sitting on top, on front of your existing ERP, and is therefore going to need to now sit in front of your new ERP. So the things that we see that need to be thought through and understood is there going to be significant GL structure changes, tax codes, coding elements, etc., in the new system that you need to take into account that's going to impact what AP do with regards to processing invoices. What is the vendor structure going to be? Sometimes if you're doing a very kind of natural progression from, let's say, SAP ECC6 up to S4HANA, it's usually fairly straightforward. But if you're maybe changing ERP brands, there will be some structural changes into the data that you're working with. So common example we'd see is Oracle has its own particular Oracle EBS, Oracle Fusion has its own unique vendor and vendor site structure, which if you're moving from that to another system, or you're moving from an existing system into Oracle, that's going to change some of the assumptions and things that you're used to working with regards to assigning invoices to suppliers, etc. So that's something you need from an AP point of view to be aware of. There's obviously getting into the more, and we get into this later, but just managing the actual transition itself in terms of how our existing open POs and things like that going to be managed, how our invoices in progress going to be managed in the transition. Also being aware of either limitations that you have with your existing system that maybe you can start to change how you function as an AP department, or maybe some upcoming restrictions that may be coming with the ERP. Give an example, some Infor products that we work with, once somebody has receipted against a purchase order, it's not possible to update that PO in the future. So that can have impact on the sequencing of things being done by AP. In some cases, if you're constrained like that, they're often reluctant to let the goods receipt be done until they're happy that the invoice they received against it is all good to go. Whereas with other solutions, that you might be moving to, that's not a restriction, and you can start to function more in a better sequence in that regard. So it's being aware of what does the new system look like with regards to all the assumptions that you've built into your existing solution. How is that going to look in your upcoming solution? So getting a good sense from the IT, from the system integrators, what that's going to look like. I think they're spelled out some of the other, I'm not going to read all the other ones, but I think that hopefully gives you a sense that you need to have your eyes open as to what's coming down the track and how it's going to change what you've been doing up until then.
And I think, Garret, that communication and collaboration definitely is vital from the outset. That's ultimately a nice segue then into, I suppose, preparing for these overall migrations as well. So again, without going down through each of these individually, based on what you've seen and from speaking to organizations and IT teams, what should organizations ultimately be doing in advance to ensure that the transition is smooth and to ensure no impact to the overall AP system and process?
Yeah, I mean, I think starting with understanding what you're doing now, and again, conscious that sometimes if you've had a solution in place for a while, it can have evolved even from your initial process flows that you might have drawn out. So just assess what you're doing at the moment. Look at it as an opportunity to improve or maybe take advantage of new things that the ERP can do with regards to the process. So start with knowing what you do and why you do things on top of your existing ERP, and see what that's going to look like in your future system. As I said, understand what are the new data structures you're going to be working with regards to vendors, GL codes, etc. Is it going to be a complete revision of your chart of accounts? How is that going to look? How is that going to impact workflows, etc., that maybe are driven by GL code assignments, that type of things? How are you going to map your old vendors into your new, what that's going to look like? Look at your open POs. It could be an opportunity that to do some house cleaning, in terms of very often you might have POs that have been open for a long time that you're really not going to be receiving future invoices against. So when it's coming to the transition window, it's ideal to have all of those cleaned up as much as possible, that you're really working off a clean set of data in terms of only genuinely open POs, only genuine vendors that you still deal with. So it's an opportunity to clean out your vendor list as well. Look at who you haven't dealt with in a particular period of time and maybe look to clean them out of the system. Also think about what's the rollout going to be. Is it going to be a big bang approach where you're going to be completely turning off the old ERP and moving on to the new one at the point of go live, or is it going to be a phased rollout? Because you'll need to think, is your AP process going to need to interact with two systems in parallel, or is it going to be a clean shift from one day working with your old ERP to the next day working with your new ERP? And that will have implications for what integrations need to stand up, how some of the data migrations might take place, etc. So these are things you'll need to take into account. And as I said, final one I kind of touched on already is starting to scale down your inputs. Look at, you don't want to be adding lots and lots of invoices, lots and lots of POs maybe in the week coming up to the transition. If that can be avoided, it might be a time to scale down that activity after the go live, so you're minimizing the amount of transition you need to do.
Perfect. I think the only other thing I'd point out, Garret, is perhaps if you do have an incumbent solution, liaising with that provider to ensure that they have experience and a ways and means of actually integrating with either that upgraded ERP system or potentially the entire new system that you're moving to as well. So it's important to communicate with them early and look at the overall possible integration.
Absolutely, yeah. That's a good overall kind of overarching point, is that the integrations need to be in place. And again, that's something you would expect and rely on your IT team to work with you on, and your AP automation provider, that the integration piece is going to be addressed usually very early in the transition process.
Yeah, because it is crucial. Moving on then, so obviously when you're in the process itself, what are some of the tips and tricks that you'd suggest organizations ensure that they look at?
Yeah, well, the first one there is, when I talked to our consultants saying we were doing this upcoming webinar, what were the lessons they took? It's test, do dress rehearsals. You'll never regret doing a test. You will definitely regret not doing a test if you haven't done enough. You ultimately want to remove all uncertainty at the point of switchover. So being able to test and create your playbook of what needs to be done as you approach your migration cutover. You need to know who needs to do what in the week or two coming up to it, and what updates need to be run. There can be some manual updates even that maybe need to be run as part of the process. There may be some scripts that need to be run, things like vendor remapping, handling PO versioning, figuring out what you're going to do with in-process invoices. What are they going to look like? How are they going to be handled and migrated over? So the more you've simulated this in your UAT environments, the better prepared and the smoother your cutover is going to be. And it's, from an AP point of view, AP is just one cog in the wheel of the overall transition. So you need to make sure you're in the testing phase, that you're making your voice heard, because once the cutover starts, it's going to be hard to be heard above the noise if issues arise. The more you can remove those from the equation, the better. And then as you get into the phase just before, obviously look to stop any creations of POs and GRNs, potentially turn off invoice inputs for a few days before, or manage what goes in, that it's only really high priority short payment term invoices that are going through, so that your amount of cutover data is minimized. You're usually looking at some kind of system freeze for a period. You obviously again need to make sure you've considered all those ERP specific nuances in terms of that transition and how you're going to migrate that data, and always ensure that you have somebody from your AP automation provider available in a hypercare mode, that if something does arise out of the blue, that you're you're able to get the help you need and get it addressed as quickly as possible. Because like I said, there's so many different aspects to the overall ERP move that you need to make sure that AP has people lined up to help should something need to be done.
Yeah, and that testing is definitely vital, Garret, and not rushing it, right? We know anyone investing in an ERP system, they're under pressure. They're huge investments. You know, they're trying to stick to very aggressive timelines, perhaps as well. And we've seen it. You know, coming up to year end, people are trying to get the system over the line before Christmas, before the holiday period, and that's, you know, we've heard the horror stories, we've seen it and heard it from many different organizations. So ensure you take the time to test it right, and don't force or push anything through until you're fully happy. And that hypercare is critical too. You know, there are a lot of AP providers that don't do that period of hypercare, and that's fundamentally a very important aspect of ensuring a successful migration and cutover. So be aware of that, and you know, mark your cards early with your AP provider that is something you insist on, and that they do provide you that critical support during that very significant point of cutover. Going on then, Garret, I think this is often an overlooked area, is, you know, people think that the finish line and the work is done once they're live, but there are a number of aspects and scenarios that people need to be aware of once they're up and running on the new ERP system. So again, just based on your experience and exposure, and based on the conversations that we've had internally with the consultants, can you maybe shed some light on those key areas?
Yeah. I mean, a number of them will have been hopefully mitigated with all of your rehearsals and checks. But yeah, you obviously need to keep an eye, make sure your open POs will come across correctly, that you have access to your historical invoice data, and all of those transitions have taken place, and do checks right after the go live, and even continue to keep an eye on that there's not something that's been missed in the subsequent days to the cutover. Obviously, as I said, you may have held off on some invoices being brought into the system. You need to make sure that you're getting back up to your processing rates, your throughput rates. So monitor those KPIs, make sure that they're as quickly as possible realigning and potentially even improving following the upgrade. If we're able to take advantage of some things that will help automation, all the better. But you need to keep an eye on, make sure there's nothing causing stuff to be going through less efficiently. So again, that next point points to that any of the automation based off of GL accounts, for example, that were driving invoice flow in under the old ERP, that they've been properly updated to automate under the new ERP, so that you're not having any more work added to your AP team in terms of automated coding, automated routing of invoices, automated that all of the matching and validations, etc., are all working with the correct tolerances, correct price and PPV allocations as before, or maybe as new under the new system. So make sure that's, keep an eye on that to make sure there's nothing that you've missed there. And as I said, again, the last point is something, again, you would have looked to right at the very start, but make sure that you're getting advantage of those things you might have identified as things that you can take advantage of. Like I said, being able to update POs despite a GRN having been allocated against, which maybe under some older ERPs may have been a restriction that would have impacted the AP sequencing. Now you can take advantage of things like that.
Great. And there is another poll, folks, that we'd love to launch at this point in time. And I'll just launch it quickly here, but we'll ultimately love to understand which of your AP processes are currently automated. So is there an element that you've automated already? And that might be the first piece of the puzzle, if you like, regarding invoice capture. Have you automated trio matching and approvals of your invoices? Have you looked to automate and put some structure and compliance across your vendor management and new vendor onboarding? Or do you have a full P2P process automation in place? So we'll just run this poll for a couple of seconds, give you all a chance to vote. Okay, I think everyone at this point in time has answered. Thank you very much for all those responses. Just in terms, Garret, of getting into our overall role and how we can support organizations during those transitions, given our 35-year business experience and history, do you want to maybe talk through some of the ERP systems that we've seen and that we've integrated with in the past?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've integrated, as I said, there with over 200, but I mean, the ones we see again and again are your SAPs, both ECC6, typically moving to S4HANA, but again, we've had some ECC6 customers who've made a change away from SAP. We've Oracle, EBS. We were on a conversation earlier on about somebody moving from Oracle JDE up to Oracle Fusion, and moving into the Dynamics, the Microsoft Dynamics world, which tends to be now is the F&O and the BC is where we see people moving to. That can be coming from an AX environment. It could be coming from, sometimes the move to ERP is triggered by the old ERP not being able to cope with the scale that the organization has achieved. So sometimes it might be coming from a lower grade, a lower scale ERP like a Sage or something. So all in all, we've had to integrate with all of those. Infor has its own rich world of different ERP sub-brands and other ones there, such as PeopleSoft and the likes. So I think we probably worked with all of the key brands, and now what we're seeing is a lot of those funneling into a more discrete set of brands, which would be the S4HANAs, the Oracle Fusions, the Dynamics F&O or BC, Infor Cloud, etc. So be happy to talk to anybody about where they are. And again, sometimes it's an opportunity to review the AP automation platform that you have in place, and that's where we're sometimes brought in, as if you're moving, maybe you don't have an AP solution at the moment and you're looking to implement it. As part of that transition to the ERP, we can come along and provide AP automation on top of your new system as well. In terms of the actual mechanics, we've got a lot of experience. We've got run books for different, in other words, sets of things to follow for moves from different systems. So we can help with that vendor and GL remapping within the AP solution, help and guide you on maintaining invoice approvals during that cutover, and help make sure that when you land on your new system that you also have all of the relevant historic data, that you've done a validated, reconciled transition of everything. So that's something that our consultants can provide a wealth of experience in assisting you with that at the time of cutover and in the cutover planning as well. So yeah, and I think that speaks to it all in terms of we've worked with our existing customers in many complex scenarios, as I said. Bang approaches, phased rollouts of new ERPs, even sometimes bringing new entities in. That can be another similar challenge as well. So again, we're happy to speak with you and provide information around how we can help guide you during that process.
Yeah, and even Garret, working with organizations that are growing via M&A activity as well, and obviously that brings about its own set of complexities with, you know, different organizations, different teams, but you know, critical to this conversation, different ERP systems, and looking at that potential ERP consolidation process as well. We can certainly help organizations that are going along that journey. Just to wrap up then, Garret, sorry to interrupt you. Do you have something else to say there?
No, I think that's, yeah, I think we've probably covered the main areas of it.
Yeah, so just in summary, based on what you've kindly brought us through earlier, you want to touch on some of these key items here?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's preparation and testing. The first two items there is don't ignore it. Make sure AP has a voice at the table early. Make sure that you come prepared. Make sure that you're participating and that you're conducting multiple rehearsals. Plan and ensure that you have somebody that you can, if something does arise, that you have both internal IT, maybe your system integrators, and also your AP automation provider available to be able to help you should something come out of the woodwork. I think if you've done the other steps well, it's minimal in terms of things that come out of the woodwork, but you always want to be prepared for that as well.
Great, I know we're coming up on time. We've a couple of minutes left. There are a few questions that have just come into us, and folks, if there are any additional questions at this point in time you'd like to submit, we would encourage you to get them through to us. But Garret, just to put you on the spot here a little bit. As I said, a few questions have come into us. First one, which I like, where do most organizations underestimate the effort involved in AP readiness?
I think it is that planning phase. It's the going through, what do we need to test, what do we need to be comfortable with, what do we need to, it's making sure that you're not relying on assumptions that are going to come back and bite you when you do that transition. Like I said, understanding new structures, new features in the ERP that may undermine some assumptions for what you're doing at the moment. As I said, most classic example is changes in vendor structure from if you're going to the likes of Oracle or coming from the likes of Oracle, that can be quite a significant change. We did work with a large retail organization a few years ago who moved to Oracle, and they had to get their head around that whole vendor and vendor site. It was a complete change for them, and we had to help guide them in that transition. So that's just one example, but be very clear as to what your new system is going to look like, and also be very clear as to how you're going to get from your old system to your new system. Don't just focus on what the new system is going to give you. Pay attention to what it's going to take to do that transition, because it's all very well understanding what it's going to look like in 3 to 6 months, but you've got to make sure that cutover is done smoothly as well.
There's another question, Garret, relating to vendor and master data management. So how does strong vendor and master data management help ensure a smooth transition?
I think, as I said earlier, use it as an opportunity to clean out, to review particularly your vendors. I think a lot of organizations we work with, when they actually look at vendor activity, maybe looking at who have we dealt with in the last 2 to 3 years, they'll often find that there's a rump of 50%, even higher, of vendors that they haven't had any dealings with in the last 2 to 3 years, and it's an opportunity to remove those. Obviously, you need to review your GL structure. It's take it as an opportunity to clean house, so that if you can do that well in advance of the cutover, it just means that the amount of data, the amount of variables that you're working with are reduced. And again, cleaning out you're reviewing all your open POs, etc. So what is genuinely an open PO, or what is one that could just be closed down? It's also an opportunity to maybe change some behaviors. You do have customers where they will keep a PO open and keep revising it year after year because it's the easy thing to do, but maybe now look at it as an opportunity that you should actually be using the PO system, the POs in a more granular way, that you shouldn't be just extending POs and keeping them open over a number of years. You should be actually raising them within a period that they're going to be used, and closing them down within that period that they were intended to be used.
Yeah, and those cleanup exercises, Garret, not only lead to a cleaner ERP system and a less clunky one, but obviously that has downstream impacts in terms of more automation you can drive across the invoice processing side of the house, less touches of invoices and overall reduced costs as well. So it is a critical component of any transition. The final question we've come into us, unless there's some others that people want to submit, if you give one piece of advice to finance leaders starting on this journey, what would it be?
I think, it's devote the time to planning. Yeah, don't wait till it's too late. Plan early and test often. They're the ultimate things I think you need to do.
Perfect. Well, we've just gone over time. Garret, thank you very much for your input and conversation. Really enjoyed it. Folks, thank you very much for dialing in and joining us here this morning or this afternoon, your time. Massively appreciate you joining the SoftCo webinar here. We will be in touch with you all individually. We'd love to get some feedback from you on whether you found the webinar beneficial. Obviously, if any of you are undergoing any ERP transitions, migration projects, either right now, imminently, or over the next number of years, as Garret has alluded to, we certainly can help and support you. So one of our team members will be in touch with you and happy to arrange subsequent calls and demonstrations as you folks see fit. So we'll leave it there, Garret. Thank you very much. Thank you, folks.
Thanks, Adam. Thanks very much. Thanks, everybody, for joining us today.
Enjoy the rest of your day. Take care, folks.